The wind was screaming across the frozen valley when Rex suddenly stopped, ears locked on something buried beneath the snow. Then he lunged, clawing wildly as Lucas Carter shouted for him to stop, but the dog wouldn't listen. Not this time. And then Lucas heard it too, a faint broken whimper. And when he dropped to his knees and brushed away the ice, he saw her mother dog curled tight around her barely breathing puppies, frozen almost solid. And without thinking, he ripped off his jacket, scooping the tiny bodies against his chest as the storm closed in. But just as he turned to run, Rex barked sharply at the ground behind them, revealing something hidden beneath the snow. And Lucas froze because this wasn't just a rescue. It was the beginning of something far bigger. Sometimes the quietest sounds are the ones that change everything. The storm had already swallowed the valley by the time Lucas Carter reached the ridge, wind slicing through his coat like it remembered every winter he had ever tried to forget. And beside him, Rex moved with a steady, deliberate pace, paws pressing into the snow, as if reading something written beneath the surface that no human could see. The sky above a dull sheet of gray, heavy and endless, and the air carried that sharp metallic scent that always came before the cold turned dangerous. The kind of cold that didn't just chill your skin but settled into your bones and stayed there long after you left, if you left at all. And Lucas pulled his collar tighter, breath fogging in front of him in slow white clouds. Each exhale a reminder that he was still here, still moving, still searching for something he couldn't quite name. Maybe peace, maybe silence, maybe just a reason to keep walking, because staying in one place too long meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering, and remembering was something he had gotten very good at avoiding. But Rex suddenly stopped, not hesitating, not unsure, just stopping like a line had been drawn across the ground that only he could see, his ears lifting, body stiff, nose twitching against the wind. And Lucas noticed it immediately, the shift, subtle but undeniable, the kind of shift he had learned to trust more than his own instincts. "What is it, boy?" he murmured, voice low, almost swallowed by the storm. But Rex didn't move, didn't look back, just stared ahead into a stretch of untouched snow. And for a moment there was nothing, no sound but the wind, no movement but the drifting flakes. And then Lucas almost dismissed it, almost took another step forward, but something in Rex's posture held him there, something firm and unyielding. And then it came, faint, so faint it could have been imagined, a thin, broken sound carried unevenly through the gusts. Not quite a cry, not quite a whimper, something in between, something fragile, and Lucas felt it before he fully heard it. A tightening in his chest, a pull he hadn't felt in a long time, and Rex moved, sudden and certain, bounding forward and dropping to his front paws, digging into the snow with urgency that bordered on desperation, sending powder spraying into the air. And Lucas followed, dropping to his knees despite the cold biting through his jeans, brushing away the ice with gloved hands that had once done far more difficult things but now trembled slightly with something he didn't want to name. And there, beneath the thin crust of frozen white, he saw them, a mother dog curled tight around a cluster of tiny bodies, her fur stiff with frost, her sides barely rising, eyes half closed but still aware, still watching, still holding on. And the puppies pressed against her, small and silent, their breath shallow, their warmth fading, and for a moment everything else disappeared, the storm, the cold, the past, it all narrowed into that single fragile scene. And Lucas felt something shift inside him, something old cracking open, not loud, not dramatic, just enough to let something through. And he reached forward without thinking, because sometimes the choice is already made long before you realize it, and sometimes the lives you find in the cold are the ones that find you first. Lucas did not remember deciding to stay. He only knew that his hands were already moving, brushing away the last layer of ice as the wind howled louder around him, as if the mountain itself disapproved of what he was about to do. But Rex stayed low beside him, body pressed close, amber eyes locked on the mother dog with a focus that felt almost human, almost protective. And when Lucas reached out, the dog did not pull away, did not growl, did not resist. She only watched him with a quiet, exhausted awareness, the kind that comes when there is nothing left to fight with. And that was what unsettled him the most. Not fear, not aggression, but trust given too easily, too quickly, as if she had already decided that whatever happened next was no longer in her control. And Lucas swallowed hard, his breath catching in the cold air as he gently lifted one of the puppies, so small it barely filled his palm, its body limp but not still, a faint warmth, lingering beneath the frost. And he brought it closer to his chest, shielding it from the wind as he unzipped his jacket, tucking the tiny shape against his thermal layer, feeling for any sign of movement, any proof that life was still holding on. And for a second there was nothing, just silence, just the distant roar of the storm, and then the slightest twitch, so small it could have been imagined. But Lucas knew better. He had learned long ago that the smallest signs were often the most important ones, and he exhaled slowly, steadying himself as he reached for the next puppy, and the next, each one colder than the last, each one lighter than it should have been, until his jacket felt heavy with fragile life, and the mother dog shifted slightly, her body trembling as she tried to follow his movements. But she could not stand, not yet, her strength nearly gone, and Lucas hesitated, just for a moment, because taking the puppies meant leaving her exposed, meant asking her to trust him completely. And that was something he was not sure he deserved. But Rex moved then, stepping forward and lowering himself beside her, pressing his body against hers, sharing what warmth he could. And Lucas felt something tighten in his chest again, something deeper this time, something that reached back into memories he'd spent years burying, memories of cold nights and impossible choices, of moments when waiting too long had cost more than he could ever repay. And he shook his head, slightly, pushing the past aside, because this moment was different. This time he was here, this time he could act, and carefully, slowly, he slid his arms beneath the mother dog, lifting her just enough to support her weight, feeling how weak she was, how close she had come to, slipping away, and she let out a soft, barely audible sound, not pain, not fear, just a quiet acknowledgement. And Lucas held her close, adjusting his grip so she rested securely against him, her head near his shoulder, her breath faint against his neck. And for a brief second, everything stilled, as if the storm itself had paused to watch, and then the wind surged again, stronger than before, driving snow sideways across the ridge, erasing their tracks almost as quickly as they made them. And Lucas knew they could not stay, not out here, not like this, and he looked toward the tree line in the distance, barely visible through the swirling white, calculating the distance, the time, the risk, and it was not ideal, not even close, but it was the only option, and he shifted his stance, tightening his hold on the dogs, feeling the weight of responsibility settle into his muscles, into his bones, and Rex stepped ahead, already moving, already guiding the path as if he had made this decision long before Lucas had. And together they started down the slope, each step deliberate, each movement careful, because the ground beneath them was uneven, hidden beneath layers of snow that concealed rocks and dips and uncertainty. And Lucas focused on his breathing, on keeping it steady, controlled, just like he had been trained, just like he had done countless times before. But this was different, because this time he was not carrying gear, not following orders, not moving toward a mission defined by someone else. This time he was carrying lives that depended entirely on him, and that realization pressed against him in a way that felt both heavy and strangely grounding. And as they moved, he became aware of the small sounds within his jacket, faint, irregular movements, the softest hints of life returning, and it fueled him, pushed him forward even as the cold bit deeper into his hands and face, even as his legs began to tire. And then, just as he thought they might make it without incident, Rex stopped again, abruptly, his body going rigid, head snapping to the side, and Lucas nearly stumbled, catching himself at the last second, his heart rate spiking as he followed the dog's gaze. And there, half buried beneath a drift of snow, was something that did not belong, a dark edge, straight and unnatural against the soft curves of the landscape. And Rex moved toward it, pawing at the surface with renewed urgency. And Lucas felt that same pull again, that quiet, insistent feeling that this was more than coincidence, more than chance. And he took a step closer, adjusting his grip on the dogs as he knelt beside the spot, brushing away the snow to reveal a metal surface, weathered but intact, And for a moment, he simply stared at it, confusion mixing with something else he could not quite name, because out here, in a place like this, things did not just appear without reason. And as the wind howled around them and the weight of the lives in his arms reminded him what mattered most, Lucas realized that whatever they had just uncovered was not separate from the rescue. It was part of it, connected in a way he did not yet understand. And he glanced at Rex, who met his gaze with that same steady intensity, as if to say that this was only the beginning. And Lucas exhaled slowly, the air leaving his lungs in a long, visible stream, because he had not come out here looking for anything, not answers, not purpose, not even hope, but somehow, in the middle of a storm, with the cold pressing in from all sides, something had found him anyway. Lucas did not touch the metal at first, not because he was afraid of it, but because something about the moment felt too deliberate, too precise, as if the storm, the dogs, and this buried object had all been waiting for him to arrive before revealing themselves, and the wind pressed harder against his back, urging him forward, reminding him that time was not something he had in abundance. Not out here. Not with the temperature dropping and the weight in his arms growing heavier with every passing second, and he shifted slightly, adjusting the mother dog so she rested more securely against his chest, her breathing still shallow but steadier than before, and beneath his jacket, the puppy stirred again, faint movements that felt like quiet promises, and Rex let out a low, focused sound, not a warning, not fear, but insistence. The same tone he had used countless times before when something mattered more than anything else around it. And Lucas exhaled, slow and controlled before, reaching down with his free hand and brushing away more of the snow, revealing the surface fully now, a rectangular hatch, metal worn smooth by time, but still solid, still intact, its edges sealed tight against the elements. And there was a handle, partially buried, cold and rigid beneath his glove. And for a moment, Lucas hesitated, because opening it meant committing to something unknown, something that could delay them, could complicate an already fragile situation, and every instinct he had told him to keep. Moving to get the dogs to shelter, to prioritize what he could see and understand, but there was another instinct, quieter, older, the one that had guided him through moments where logic alone had not been enough, and it told him that this mattered, that this was connected. And Rex stepped closer, placing one paw firmly against the edge of the hatch as if marking it, claiming it, and Lucas nodded once, almost to himself, before gripping the handle and pulling. And at first nothing happened, the metal resisting, frozen in place by time and ice, but he adjusted his stance, bracing his boots against the snow, shifting his weight carefully so he would not lose balance. And he pulled again, harder this time, and there was a faint sound, a subtle release, followed by the slow, reluctant movement of the hatch lifting just enough to break the seal, and cold air rushed up from below, not the sharp, biting cold of the storm, but something different, something still, almost preserved, and Lucas paused, feeling that shift immediately, the contrast between the chaos above and the quiet beneath. And he lifted the hatch further, revealing darkness at first, then shape, then structure, a narrow staircase descending into the earth, each step dusted with a thin layer of frost, but otherwise untouched, as if no one had been there for a very long time. And Rex leaned forward slightly, ears high, listening not to the wind anymore, but to something deeper, something below. And Lucas felt his pulse quicken, not from fear, but from recognition, the kind that comes when something unknown feels strangely familiar, and he adjusted his grip on the dogs again, the mother dog stirring faintly as the warmer air brushed against her fur. And for the first time since he had found them, she opened her eyes fully, looking not at Lucas, but at the opening beneath them, her gaze steady despite her weakness. And Lucas followed that look, his mind working through possibilities, scenarios, risks, and yet none of them fully explained why this place existed out here, hidden beneath snow and silence. And the storm howled above them. But down here, just beyond the threshold, there was a different kind of quiet, the kind that did not feel empty, but waiting. And Lucas knew he could not stand there forever, not with the cold pressing in, not with the lives in his arms depending on him. and yet something told him that stepping inside might be the only way to keep them alive, and he looked at Rex, who met his gaze without hesitation, tail still, posture firm, ready, and Lucas gave a small nod, the kind that did not need words, and carefully, deliberately, he shifted his weight forward and placed one foot onto the first step, testing it, feeling the solid resistance beneath him. And when it held, he began to descend, one step at a time. The hatch still open above them, the storm still raging, but already fading, already distant. And as he moved deeper, the air grew calmer, less hostile, and the sounds of the wind softened into something far away, almost forgotten, and the light from above stretched down in a narrow beam, illuminating just enough to guide him. And Lucas felt something settle inside him. Not comfort exactly, but a sense that this place, whatever it was, had been built for a purpose, and that purpose had not ended, not yet. And as his boots reached the bottom, he paused again, letting his eyes adjust to the dim space around him, the outlines of walls, the faint shapes of objects covered in dust and time, and behind him, Rex followed, stepping down with quiet precision, and above them, the hatch creaked slightly in the wind, but did not close, leaving a thin line of gray light as the only connection to the world they had just left behind. And Lucas tightened his hold on the dogs, feeling their fragile warmth against him, and took one slow breath, because whatever waited in this hidden place, it had already begun to change everything, even before he understood how. The air inside the underground space carried a stillness that felt almost deliberate, as if time itself had chosen to slow down the moment Lucas Carter stepped beyond the storm. And for the first time since the wind had started biting through his skin, he felt it loosen its grip, not completely, not enough to be called safe, but enough to remind him that survival sometimes begins with a single shift in the air, and he stood there for a second longer than necessary, letting his eyes adjust, letting his breathing settle. The mother dog pressed against him, giving off the faintest warmth, her body no longer rigid, with cold but not yet steady. And beneath his jacket, the puppies moved again, weak but present, their small lives threading quietly back into the world. And Rex moved ahead, paws silent against the floor, his nose low, ears forward, scanning the space with that same disciplined awareness that had guided them here. And Lucas followed slowly, each step careful, not out of fear, but out of respect for a place that felt untouched, preserved in a way that did not happen by accident. And, as his vision sharpened, the room began to reveal itself. Not large, not elaborate, but purposeful, with walls reinforced by aged wood and metal beams, surfaces coated in a thin layer of dust that spoke of years, maybe decades, of quiet waiting. And along one side there were shelves, simple but sturdy, holding objects arranged with a kind of order that had not been disturbed, old lanterns, sealed containers, folded fabric that might have once been blankets. And Lucas felt that familiar shift in his chest again, that subtle tightening that came when something hidden started to make sense in pieces, not fully, not yet, but enough to feel real. And he moved toward the near surface, carefully lowering the mother dog onto a flat wooden bench, supporting her weight until she could settle without slipping, and she let out a soft breath, deeper than before, her body relaxing slightly as the warmer air reached her, and Rex stepped close, lowering his head beside hers, watching her with quiet intensity. And Lucas unzipped his jacket, bringing the puppies out one by one, placing them gently beside their mother, his hands slower now, more deliberate, as if each movement carried more meaning than the last. And for a moment he simply watched them, the way the smallest one shifted closer to the others, the way the mother dog adjusted her position just enough to shelter them again. And it struck him then, not as a thought, but as a feeling, that even here, even in a place hidden beneath snow and silence, life still found a way to gather, to hold on, to begin again. And Lucas turned his attention to the room, scanning for anything that could help, anything that could make the difference between surviving the night and losing what he had just fought to save. And he found it in the corner, a metal box, its surface worn, but intact. And when he opened it, the hinges creaked softly, not in protest but in recognition. and inside were supplies, not new, not untouched, but preserved well enough to be used, thermal blankets folded tight, small fuel canisters, a compact heater, and Lucas let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Because this was not chance, this was intention. Someone had built this place to endure, to be found when needed. And he moved quickly now, his actions steady, practiced, setting. Up the heater, wrapping the blankets around the dogs, creating a pocket of warmth that began to push back against the cold that still clung to their bodies. And Rex stayed close, occasionally shifting to block a draft Lucas could not feel, but the dog clearly could. And as the minutes passed, the space began to change, the air softening, the silence deepening, and the puppies responded first, their movements growing slightly stronger, their breathing more consistent, and the mother dog lifted her head just enough to look at Lucas, her eyes clearer now, no longer clouded by exhaustion alone. And there was something in that look, something steady and aware, not just gratitude, not just relief, but recognition, as if she understood more than she should, as if she knew that this place, this moment, was not simply about survival. And Lucas felt that same quiet unease return, not fear, but awareness. Because places like this did not exist without reason, and rescues like this did not unfold without purpose. And he stood slowly, glancing around again, this time with a different kind of attention, noticing details he had missed before, markings on the walls, faint but deliberate, symbols or codes that meant something to someone. And he stepped closer, brushing away dust with his gloved hand, revealing a small engraved plate set into the wood, the metal dulled by time, but still legible. And he leaned in slightly, his breath slowing as he read it. Because whatever this place was, whoever had built it, they had left something behind. Not just shelter, not just supplies, but a message. And as the quiet warmth of the underground space settled around him and the storm faded into a distant memory above, Lucas realized that the rescue had not ended when he brought the dogs inside. It had only changed shape, and whatever came next was already beginning to unfold in ways he had not yet understood. Lucas did not rush to read the engraved plate, not because he was uninterested, but because something inside him understood that once he did, whatever this place meant would become real in a way that could not be undone. And for now, there were still lives in front of him that needed his attention more than any hidden message ever could. And he stepped back toward the bench where the mother dog lay, her breathing steadier now, her body no longer trembling with the same urgency. And the puppies had begun to press closer together, their small forms shifting with more intention, more strength than before. And Lucas knelt beside them again, adjusting the thermal blanket so it covered them more completely, his hands moving with a care that had nothing to do with training and everything to do with something quieter, something deeper. And Rex remained at their side, his posture relaxed now, but still alert, as if he had accepted that this place was safe for the moment, but not yet fully understood it. And Lucas exhaled slowly, letting the warmth of the space settle into his muscles, easing the tension he had carried since the storm first rose around him. And it was in that quiet that his thoughts began to return, not the loud, chaotic kind that demanded attention, but the softer ones, the ones that usually waited until there was nothing else left to distract him. And he glanced again toward the engraved plate across the room, the faint markings catching what little light filtered down from above, and something about it felt familiar, not in detail, but in intention, as if he had seen something like it before long ago in a different place under very different circumstances. And that memory hovered just out of reach, like a word on the tip of his tongue that refused to fully form. And he stood slowly, his movements deliberate, as if approaching the plate too quickly might disturb whatever meaning it held. And when he reached it, he brushed away the remaining dust more carefully this time, revealing the full inscription beneath, the letters etched with precision that had endured the passing of years. And he read them once, then again, letting each word settle, not just in his mind, but somewhere deeper, somewhere that recognized the weight behind them. And the message was simple, almost understated, but it carried a kind of quiet certainty that made it impossible to ignore. And Lucas felt his chest tighten again, not from cold, not from strain, but from something else entirely, something that felt like recognition and unease intertwined, because this was not just a shelter, not just a forgotten structure left behind by chance. This had been built with purpose, with intention, by someone who understood what it meant to need a place like this. And as that realization settled in, Lucas became aware of another detail, one he had missed before: a small metal tag fixed just beneath the plate, worn but still intact. And when he leaned closer, his breath slowing again, he saw it clearly, the faint outline of a symbol he knew, not from memory alone, but from experience, from years spent in environments where symbols like this meant more than decoration. And his hand hovered just above it for a second before he let it rest against the cool surface. And in that moment, the distance between past and present narrowed. Not completely, not enough to overwhelm him, but enough to remind him that the life he had tried to leave behind was not as far away as he sometimes believed, and behind him there was a soft sound, a small shift, and Lucas turned quickly, his focus snapping back to the dogs, and what he saw stopped him in place, because the smallest puppy, the one that had felt the coldest when he first lifted it, was now moving with more certainty, its tiny body pressing forward, finding its way toward its mother with a determination that seemed almost disproportionate to its size. And the mother dog responded, lifting her head slightly, adjusting her position to guide it closer, and Lucas felt that quiet shift again, that subtle but undeniable reminder that life does not wait for perfect conditions to begin again. It simply finds a way, and he stepped back toward them, kneeling once more, his movements slower now, more grounded, and Rex glanced up at him briefly before returning his attention to the dogs, as if acknowledging that this moment, this fragile return, mattered more than anything else in the room. And Lucas let out a long breath, the kind that seemed to carry more than just air. And for the first time since he had stepped into the storm that morning, he felt something settle inside him. Not completely, not enough to erase everything that had come before, but enough to create space for something new. And he looked around the room again, this time not as someone searching for answers, but as someone beginning to understand that answers might not arrive all at once, that sometimes they reveal themselves slowly, piece by piece, through moments like this, through lives saved and paths altered in ways that only make sense later. And he reached down gently, placing his hand near the mother dog's shoulder, not touching, not forcing contact, just offering presence. And she turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze with that same steady awareness. And Lucas realized then that whatever had led them here, whatever had drawn Rex to that exact spot in the storm, whatever had buried this place beneath years of silence, it was not random, and he did not yet know what it meant, but he could feel it, the same way he had felt the faint sound beneath the wind, the same way Rex had known to stop, to listen, to act. And as the quiet warmth of the underground space held steady around them and the storm continued to fade into the distance above, Lucas understood something he had not allowed himself to consider in a very long time, that sometimes the things we think we find by accident are actually the things that have been waiting for us all along. The warmth in the underground room did not feel like comfort in the usual sense. It felt earned, fragile, like something that could disappear if he stopped paying attention. And Lucas Carter remained still for a long moment, watching the slow return of life in the small space he had not known existed an hour ago. The puppies shifting closer together, their movements no longer random but purposeful, guided by instinct that had not been lost even in the cold. And the mother dog lay with her head slightly raised now, her breathing deeper, more even, her eyes open and steady, following Lucas not with fear, but with a quiet awareness that seemed to reach beyond the moment. And Rex sat beside them, posture relaxed but alert, his presence constant, grounded, as if he had already accepted that this place was part of their path. And Lucas exhaled slowly, letting his shoulders drop just enough to release some of the tension that had held him since the storm first closed in, but not all of it, because something about this place, about the plate on the wall, about the symbol he recognized but had not yet fully allowed himself to name, lingered just beneath the surface of his thoughts. And he stood again, turning his attention back toward the far side of the room, where the shelves held more than just supplies, with a quiet order of things hinted at a story that had not yet been told. And he moved carefully, not wanting to disturb the fragile calm behind him, his boots making soft, measured sounds against the floor. And as he reached the shelves, he began to notice the details more clearly, the way each item had been placed with intention, not cluttered, not abandoned, but preserved, as if whoever had built this place had expected someone to find it, someone who would understand how to use what had been left behind. And Lucas reached for one of the containers, opening it slowly, revealing tools inside, simple but well-maintained, items that spoke of repair, of survival, of patience rather than urgency. And that detail stayed with him, because places built in haste did not look like this. They did not carry this kind of quiet discipline. And as he set the container back, his gaze shifted to a corner he had not yet explored, partially hidden by shadow, and Rex noticed it at the same time. Rising to his feet and stepping forward without hesitation, his ears lifting, his attention narrowing in that familiar way, and Lucas followed, his senses sharpening instinctively, not because he expected danger, but because experience had taught him that the unknown often revealed itself in layers, not all at once. And as they approached, the shape in the corner became clearer, not just shadow, but structure, a second doorway, smaller than the first entrance, its frame reinforced, its surface marked with the same subtle signs of age and intention. And Lucas paused there, studying it, feeling that same quiet pull again, stronger this time, as if whatever lay beyond it was not separate from the rest of this place, but central to it. And he glanced back briefly toward the dogs, confirming what he already sensed, that they were stable, that for the moment they were safe, and Rex stood beside him now, his gaze fixed on the door, not restless, not anxious, but focused, ready. And Lucas reached out, his hand resting lightly against the surface, feeling the texture beneath his glove, the faint irregularities that spoke of time and use, and he took a slow breath, because opening this door meant stepping further into something he did not yet understand, and yet turning away from it felt just as impossible. And he shifted his weight slightly, grounding himself in the moment, in the present, in the quiet rhythm of breath and heartbeat that reminded him he was here, now, not in the past, not in memory. And he pushed the door gently, testing it, and it moved, not easily, but not resistant either, opening just enough to allow a thin line of dim light to spill through from whatever space lay beyond. And the air that followed was different, warmer, not by much, but enough to notice, enough to suggest that this place extended further than he had first thought. And Lucas felt that subtle shift inside him again, that quiet alignment between instinct and action. And without speaking, without hesitation, he pushed the door open further, stepping forward just enough to see what lay beyond. And as the space revealed itself slowly, detail by detail, he realized that whatever had brought him here, whatever had guided Rex to that exact point in the storm, it had not finished yet. Not even close, and behind him, the soft sound of the puppies moving and the steady presence of Rex at his side anchored him in a way he had not expected, because for the first time in a long time, he was not moving through something alone, and that changed everything, even before he fully understood how. The space beyond the second door unfolded slowly, not all at once, but in quiet layers that revealed themselves as Lucas Carter stepped forward, each detail emerging with a kind of patience that made the moment feel deliberate. And the first thing he noticed was the light, not bright, not artificial, but a soft, diffused glow that seemed to come from above, filtered through something unseen, giving the room a muted warmth that felt almost out of place beneath the frozen earth. And he paused, just inside the threshold, letting his eyes adjust, letting his senses catch up to what they were seeing, because this was no longer just a shelter, no longer just a place meant for survival. This was something more, something built with care that extended beyond necessity. And Rex moved ahead of him, not rushing, not cautious, but steady, his paws silent against the floor as he explored the new space with the same focused awareness that had guided them from the storm. And Lucas followed, his steps slower now, more deliberate, as if each movement needed to be understood before the next could begin, and the room itself was larger than the one before, its walls lined with shelves and surfaces that held objects arranged with a kind of quiet precision, books sealed in protective covers, maps carefully rolled and secured, tools that spoke of craftsmanship rather than urgency. And there was a table near the center, solid and worn, its surface marked by years of use, but still strong, still dependable. And Lucas felt something shift inside him again, that subtle sense of recognition growing clearer, not in the details themselves, but in the intention behind them, because this place had not been built in panic, it had not been abandoned in haste, it had been created with purpose, maintained with discipline, and left behind with the expectation that someone would eventually arrive. And as that thought settled in, Lucas became aware of another detail, one that drew his attention. Immediately, a series of photographs arranged along the far wall, their edges slightly worn but still intact, and he moved toward them, his breath slowing as he approached, because there was something about them that felt different from the rest of the room, more personal, more grounded in memory than in function. And when he reached them, he stopped, his gaze settling on the first image. And what he saw held him there, not because it was shocking, but because it was familiar in a way he had not expected. The photograph showed a man standing beside a dog, both facing the camera with a quiet confidence that needed no explanation, and the dog, a German shepherd, stood tall at the man's side, its posture alert, its presence unmistakable. And Lucas felt his chest tighten slightly, not from discomfort, but from recognition, because he knew that look, he knew that kind of bond. And he shifted his gaze to the next photograph, and then the next, each one telling a piece of story that had not yet been fully revealed, images of the same man in different places, different seasons, always with the dog beside him, always with that same steady presence. And Rex stepped closer then, his head tilting slightly as he looked up at the photographs, his ears flicking once, as if acknowledging something beyond the image itself. And Lucas let out a slow breath, because the connection was becoming harder to ignore, the lines between coincidence and intention blurring with each new detail. And he reached out, his fingers brushing lightly against the edge of one photograph, feeling the texture of it, the reality of it. And for a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath, the quiet deepening in a way that felt almost expectant. And then there was a sound behind him, soft, subtle, but enough to draw his attention back. And he turned, his focus returning immediately to the doorway, to the space he had just left, where the mother dog and her puppies rested, and he listened, not just with his ears, but with that deeper awareness that had guided him through countless moments before. And what he heard was not distress, not urgency, but movement, stronger than before, more certain, and he felt a small, steady relief settle into his chest, because they were still here, still holding on, still moving forward. And Rex moved back toward him then, his gaze meeting Lucas's for a brief moment before shifting again toward the photographs, as if to remind him that both things mattered, the lives he had saved and the story unfolding around him. And Lucas nodded slightly, more to himself than to the dog, because he understood that now, understood that this was not a choice between one or the other, but a path that held both. And he turned back to the wall, his attention sharpening as he looked more closely at the images, noticing details he had missed before, the subtle markings on the man's jacket, the small insignia that had once meant something specific, something earned. And Lucas felt that recognition settle fully this time. No longer distant, no longer uncertain, but clear, undeniable. And it changed the way he saw the room, the way he understood the space he stood in. Because this was not just a hidden shelter left behind by someone unknown. This was something built by someone who had walked a path not unlike his own, someone who had understood what it meant to need a place like this, to prepare for moments when the world above became too much, too cold, too unforgiving. And as that realization took hold, Lucas felt something else shift within him, something quieter, something that did not demand attention, but made itself known all the same. A sense that whatever had brought him here, whatever had guided Rex through the storm, it had not been random. It had been intentional in a way that extended beyond coincidence. And he stood there for a moment longer, letting that understanding settle, letting the quiet of the room wrap around him, before turning back toward the doorway once more. Because no matter what this place revealed, no matter what story it held, there were still lives behind him that depended on what he did next. And for now, that was enough to guide him forward. Lucas Carter stood for a moment longer in front of the photographs, not moving, not speaking, just letting the quiet weight of them settle into him. Because there was something about the way the man stood beside the dog, something steady and unspoken, that felt less like a memory and more like a reflection, and he could not ignore the way it mirrored something in his own life, something he had not looked at directly in a long time. And Rex shifted beside him, letting out a soft breath as if acknowledging that same connection, before turning and moving back toward the doorway without hesitation. And Lucas followed, his steps slower now, not from uncertainty, but from awareness. Because each detail in this place seemed to carry meaning that revealed itself only when he allowed himself to notice it. And when he stepped back into the first room, the warmth greeted him again, softer now, more settled, and the change in the dogs was immediate. The puppies were no longer still bundles of fragile life, but small, determined movements, pressing against their mother, finding her, guided by something instinctive and unbroken. And the mother dog herself had shifted her head, raised higher, her eyes clearer, tracking Lucas as he approached. And there was strength there now, not fully returned, but present, growing, and Lucas knelt beside them, his movements quieter than before, more grounded, as if the urgency had transformed into something steadier, something that no longer rushed but simply continued. And he adjusted the blanket again, ensuring the warmth stayed close, his hands moving with care that came naturally now, without thought, and Rex settled on the other side, forming a quiet barrier that held the space together. And for a moment, everything felt balanced, the storm above distant, the cold held at bay, the lives before him steady and returning, and Lucas let out a slow breath, the kind that did not just leave his lungs, but seemed to carry something heavier with it, something he had been holding for longer than he realized. And it was in that moment of stillness that he noticed it, a faint sound, not from the dogs, not from Rex, but from somewhere deeper within the structure, of a low, rhythmic tone that was almost too subtle to recognize at first, like a distant echo repeating at steady intervals. And Lucas lifted his head slightly, his focus sharpening as he listened, counting without meaning to the way he had learned long ago, 1, 2, 3, and then the sound again, steady, consistent, not random. And Rex heard it too, his ears lifting, his posture shifting just enough to signal attention without alarm. And Lucas stood, slowly, his movements controlled, deliberate, as he turned toward the far wall where the sound seemed to originate. And the room felt different now, not unsafe, but aware, as if it had shifted in response to something unseen. And he stepped forward, his boots making soft contact with the floor, his breath steady, his senses aligned in that quiet way that came when instinct took over, without needing permission. And as he reached the wall, he placed his hand against it, just as he had done earlier against the stone above. And there was again the faint vibration beneath his palm, subtle but real, repeating at a steady rhythm that did not match the storm, did not match anything outside. And Lucas felt his chest tighten slightly, not with fear, but with recognition, because this was not unfamiliar, this pattern, this controlled repetition. It belonged to something intentional, something designed. And he closed his eyes briefly, focusing on it, letting the rhythm settle into his awareness. And when he opened them again, he glanced toward Rex, who was already moving, stepping closer to the wall, his nose low, tracing along the surface until he stopped at a specific point, one that looked no different from the rest at first glance, but Rex held there, still, certain, and Lucas moved beside him, brushing his hand across the area, feeling for any difference, any indication of what lay beneath. And it took a moment, just a small shift in texture, a slight inconsistency in the surface that would have gone unnoticed if he had not been looking for it, and he pressed lightly, testing it, and the wall responded, not dramatically, not suddenly, but with a quiet give that confirmed what he had begun to suspect. And Lucas exhaled slowly, his thoughts aligning as the pieces began to come together, because this place was not just a shelter, not just a memory. It was something active, something still functioning in ways he did not yet fully understand. And behind him, the soft sounds of the puppies continued, small movements, quiet life returning, grounding him in the present even as something deeper began to unfold. And Lucas placed his hand more firmly against the hidden panel, feeling the faint vibration beneath it, steady, waiting, and he understood then that whatever this was, whatever it led to, it had not been left here by accident, and neither had he. And for the first time since the storm began, Lucas Carter realized that he was not just passing through this place, he was part of it now, whether he fully understood it or not. Lucas did not push the hidden panel right away, not because he was unsure, but because something inside him understood that once he did, whatever this place truly was would begin to reveal itself in ways he could not reverse. And he had learned long ago that some doors, once opened, did not close the same way again. And so he stood there with his hand resting against the surface, feeling the faint rhythm beneath it, steady and precise, as if something beyond the wall was still alive, still functioning, still waiting, and behind him, the quiet sounds of the puppies grounded him, their small movements, their soft breaths, reminders that life was still unfolding in the simplest and most important ways. And Lucas exhaled slowly, letting that anchor him, letting it keep him present, because whatever this was, it was not more important than them. Not yet. And he turned slightly, glancing back toward the bench where the mother dog lay. And what he saw held him there for a moment, her head now fully raised, her eyes alert, watching him not with confusion or fear, but with something closer to understanding. And one of the puppies had managed to push itself closer to her side, finding warmth, finding safety, and Lucas felt that same quiet shift inside him again, that steady, grounding pull that reminded him why he had stopped in the storm, why he had chosen to act. And Rex moved then, stepping between Lucas and the wall, his body angled slightly, not blocking but redirecting, his gaze meeting Lucas's for just a second before shifting back toward the dogs. And the message was clear without needing words. Not everything had to be uncovered at once. Not every mystery needed to be solved before the present moment was secured. And Lucas nodded slightly, more to himself than to the dog, before pulling his hand away from the panel, the faint vibration still lingering in his palm even after contact was gone. And he stepped back, returning to the bench, his movements slower now, more intentional, as if he had chosen, at least for now, to let whatever lay beyond the wall remain where it was. And as he knelt beside the dogs again, he noticed something he had not fully seen before, the mother dog's gaze shifting, not randomly, but with purpose, toward a specific spot on the floor near the base of the wall. And Lucas followed that gaze, his attention narrowing, his instincts quietly re-engaging, because animals did not focus like that without reason. And he moved closer, lowering himself slightly to examine the area, his hand brushing lightly across the surface until he felt it, a subtle difference, a small indentation that did not match the rest of the floor, and he pressed gently, testing it, and there was a soft sound, almost inaudible, like something unlocking beneath the surface, and Lucas paused, his breath steady, but his awareness sharpened. Because this was different from the panel, this was smaller, more precise, and Rex stepped closer again, his nose hovering just above the spot, his ears tilted forward, waiting, and Lucas pressed a little more firmly this time, and a section of the floor shifted slightly, revealing a narrow compartment beneath, hidden but not forgotten, and inside there was a small object, wrapped carefully in a layer of protective cloth, preserved with the same quiet intention as everything else in this place. And Lucas reached for it slowly, lifting it out with care, the weight of it surprisingly light. And as he unwrapped the cloth, the room seemed to grow even quieter, as if the act itself mattered in a way that extended beyond simple discovery. And when the final layer fell away, what remained in his hands was not large, not complex, but unmistakable, a worn metal tag, its surface marked with the same symbol he had seen before, but clearer now, more defined, and beneath it, engraved in small, steady letters, was a name, and Lucas felt something shift inside him again, not sudden, not overwhelming, but deep, like a memory rising slowly to the surface, and he did not need to speak it aloud to understand what it meant, because the connection had already begun to form, piece by piece, through everything he had seen since stepping into this place. And behind him, the mother dog let out a soft, steady breath, her body fully relaxed now, her strength returning, and the puppies moved with more certainty, their small lives continuing forward without hesitation, and Lucas closed his hand gently around the tag, not gripping it tightly, but holding it with a kind of quiet respect, because whatever this was, whatever story it belonged to, it had not been left here without reason, and neither had he, and as he sat there in the dim warmth beneath the storm, the faint rhythm still echoing behind the wall, the lives he had saved resting beside him, Lucas Carter understood something he had not allowed himself to consider in a very long time, that sometimes the path forward is not found by searching, but by listening and by choosing again and again to stay when it would be easier to walk away. Lucas Carter did not open his hand right away, not because he was unsure of what he held, but because something in him understood that the weight of it was not in the metal itself, but in what it connected, and he sat there for a moment longer, the quiet warmth of the underground space settling around him, the soft movements of the puppies continuing beside him, and the steady presence of Rex grounding him in a way that felt both familiar and new. And when he finally looked down, his gaze steady, his breathing even, he turned the tag slightly in his palm, letting the faint light catch the engraving more clearly, and the name etched into the surface came into focus, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just a name, simple and deliberate, but it carried something more, something that resonated beyond the letters themselves, and Lucas felt that recognition again, deeper this time, not as a memory he could fully place, but as a connection he could not ignore, and he exhaled slowly, his thumb brushing lightly across the surface, as if confirming that it was real, that this was not just another piece of story left behind, but something meant to be found, meant to be understood, and behind him there was a small shift, a soft sound that pulled his attention back, and he turned, his focus returning immediately to the dogs, and what he saw held him there, the smallest puppy, the one that had struggled the most, now moving with a quiet determination, its body pressing forward, finding its place beside its mother with a strength that had not been there before. And the mother dog responded, lowering her head slightly, guiding it closer, her breathing steady, her presence calm, and Lucas felt something ease inside him, not fully, not completely, but enough to remind him that whatever else this place held, whatever else it revealed, this moment, this simple return of life, mattered more than anything else. And he shifted slightly, placing the tag carefully beside him on the bench, not out of disregard, but out of respect, because some things were not meant to be held tightly, not yet, and he reached out, adjusting the blanket again, ensuring the warmth stayed close, his hands steady, his movements precise, and Rex leaned in slightly, his posture relaxed but attentive, his gaze moving between Lucas and the dogs, as if measuring the balance of the moment. And for a while, everything remained still, not empty, but full in a quiet way, the kind of stillness that does not demand attention but holds it anyway. And Lucas allowed himself to stay there, to remain present in it, because it had been a long time since he had allowed himself to simply exist without needing to move, without needing to anticipate what came next. And it was in that stillness that the faint rhythm returned to his awareness, not louder, not more urgent, but steady, consistent, a quiet reminder that something beneath the surface was still active, still waiting, and Lucas lifted his head. Slightly, his gaze shifting toward the wall where the hidden panel remained closed, and he felt that pull again, not stronger, but clearer, as if whatever lay beyond was not trying to force its way into the moment, but simply existing, patient, allowing him to come to it when he was ready. And he glanced down at the tag again, the engraved name catching his attention once more, and something about it aligned with that rhythm, not in a way he could explain, but in a way he could feel, as if the two were connected, as if one led to the other. And Lucas reached for it again, lifting it carefully, turning it once more in his hand. And this time, he noticed something he had not seen before, a second line beneath the name, smaller, more subtle, but just as deliberate, and he leaned in slightly, his breath slowing as he read it. And the words were simple, almost understated, but they carried a direction, not an instruction, not a command, but a quiet suggestion, something that pointed forward rather than explained what had come before. And Lucas felt that shift again, that alignment between instinct and understanding, and he stood slowly, the tag still in his hand, his movements steady, deliberate, as he turned once more toward the wall, toward the hidden panel that pulsed with that faint, steady rhythm. And Rex rose with him, stepping to his side without hesitation, his posture calm but ready, and Lucas took a slow breath, grounding himself in the present, in the warmth of the room, in the quiet lives behind him that had already begun to change him in ways he had not expected. And he placed his hand against the panel again, the vibration meeting his palm with that same steady pulse. And this time, he did not hesitate, not because he had all the answers, but because he understood that he did not need them yet, that sometimes moving forward was not about certainty, but about trust. And he pressed more firmly, feeling the mechanism respond beneath his hand. And as the panel began to shift, opening slowly, revealing the space beyond, Lucas Carter stepped forward, not as someone searching for something lost, but as someone beginning to understand that what he had found was only the beginning. The panel did not open all at once. It shifted slowly, almost reluctantly, as if it had not been touched in years, and the sound it made was not loud, not sharp, but low and steady, like something remembering how to move again after a long silence. And Lucas Carter kept his hand pressed against it as it gave way, guiding the motion with a kind of quiet patience. And as the opening widened, the air that emerged was different from anything he had felt before, not just warmer, but still in a way that felt intentional, as if the space beyond had been sealed from time itself. And he stepped forward, one careful step at a time, the faint rhythm that had drawn him here now clearer, no longer distant, but present, steady, and undeniable. And Rex moved beside him without hesitation, his posture aligned with Lucas, his presence grounded and certain, and together they crossed the threshold into the hidden chamber. And the first thing Lucas noticed was the light, not from above, not from any visible source, but a soft ambient glow that seemed to exist within the space itself, illuminating it just enough to reveal its form without exposing everything at once. And he paused there, letting his eyes adjust, letting his senses settle into this new environment, because this was not just another room, not just another extension of the shelter. This was something else entirely, something that carried a different kind of weight. And as his vision sharpened, the shapes began to form, the outlines of objects arranged with a precision that felt almost ceremonial. A central platform raised slightly from the floor, its surface smooth and clean despite the passage of time. And surrounding it were smaller structures, consoles, or panels, their surfaces marked with symbols that echoed the one on the tag in his hand. The same pattern, the same deliberate design, and Lucas felt that connection tighten, not as a thought, but as something deeper, something that linked the object he held to the space he now stood in. And the rhythm pulsed again, stronger this time, not loud, but clear, and Lucas turned his head slightly, tracing the sound until his gaze settled on the center of the platform. And there, embedded within it, was the source, a small, circular device, its surface faintly illuminated, its motion subtle but constant, as if it had been waiting, not dormant, not inactive, but simply waiting. And Lucas took a step closer, his movements slow, deliberate, because something about this moment felt important in a way that did not need explanation. And Rex stayed just behind him, his ears forward, his attention fixed but calm, as if he understood that this was not a moment of danger, but of discovery. And Lucas stopped just short of the platform, the device now fully visible before him, its steady pulse matching the rhythm he had felt through the walls, through the floor, through his own hand. And he lifted the tag slightly, almost without thinking, holding in front of him. And as he did, something shifted, not in the room itself, but in the space between them, the device responding with a subtle change in its light, a faint increase in intensity that was easy to miss if he had not been watching closely, and Lucas felt his breath slow, his focus narrowing, because this was no longer coincidence, no longer a series of unrelated discoveries. This was connection, deliberate and precise. And he stepped forward again, closing the distance between himself and the platform, the tag still in his hand. And as he brought it closer, the device responded again, the light steady but brighter now, the rhythm unchanged but more present. And Lucas understood then, not fully, not completely, but enough, that this place had been waiting for something, not just anyone, not just time, but something specific, something that matched what he now held. And behind him, the quiet world of the dogs continued, the soft sounds of life returning, grounding him in the present even as this deeper layer unfolded. And Lucas reached out slowly, his hand steady as he moved the tag toward the surface of the device, not forcing it, not pressing it into place, just allowing it to meet whatever it was meant to meet. And for a moment, nothing happened, just the steady pulse, just the quiet glow, and then gently, almost imperceptibly, the device responded, the light shifting in tone, warming slightly, the rhythm adjusting just enough to be noticed, and Lucas felt it, not through sound, not through sight, but through something deeper, a resonance that moved through him in a way he could not explain, and he stood there still present, allowing the moment to unfold without trying to control it, without trying to understand it all at once, because he knew better now, knew that some things revealed themselves only when given the space to do so. And Rex stepped closer then, his shoulder brushing lightly against Lucas's leg, a quiet reminder that he was not alone in this, that whatever this place was, whatever it meant, it had brought them both here for a reason. And Lucas exhaled slowly, the air leaving his lungs in a long, steady breath, because for the first time since the storm had begun, he was not reacting, not surviving. He was simply standing at the edge of something new, something that did not demand urgency, but presence. And as the device continued its steady pulse, now aligned with the object in his hand, Lucas Carter understood that the path he had stepped onto was no longer just about getting through the storm. It was about what waited on the other side of it, and whatever that was, it had already begun to change him. The light did not flare or flash when the tag aligned with the device. It deepened, softened, as if something long dormant had chosen not to awaken suddenly, but to breathe again. And Lucas Carter remained still, his hand steady, his focus anchored in the quiet rhythm that now felt less like an external force and more like something he could feel within his own chest. And for a moment, the space seemed to shift around him, not physically, but in the way it held itself, as if it recognized his presence, as if it had been waiting not for movement, but for acknowledgement. And Rex stayed close, his posture calm, his breathing even, the kind of stillness that did not come from uncertainty, but from trust. And Lucas lowered the tag slightly, not removing it completely, just enough to see how the device responded, and it did not lose its rhythm, did not dim. It continued, steady and aligned, as if the connection had already been made, as if the moment of recognition had passed, and something else had taken its place, something quieter, more enduring. And Lucas exhaled slowly, letting his shoulders ease, because whatever this was, it was not fragile in the way he had expected. It was stable, intentional, and he stepped back just enough to take in the space more fully, his gaze moving across the chamber, noticing details that had been hidden by the weight of the moment before. The way the surfaces curved slightly toward the center, the way the markings on the surrounding panels formed patterns that were not random, but deliberate. And as he looked closer, he realized that they were not just symbols. They were sequences, instructions of a kind that did not need to be read in the traditional sense, but understood through recognition. And something in him responded to that, not as knowledge, but as familiarity, as if the part of him that had learned to navigate uncertain terrain, to read patterns where others saw chaos, was now being asked to do the same in a different way. And he moved slowly around the platform, his steps measured, his attention shifting from one detail to the next. And as he did, the device remained steady, its rhythm unchanged, its light constant, and that constancy began to settle into him. easing the tension that had followed him from the storm, replacing it with something quieter, something that did not demand action but invited presence. And behind him, faint but clear, came the soft sound of the puppies, a small whine, not of distress, but of life, of movement. And Lucas turned slightly, his awareness pulling him back toward the other room, toward the simple, fragile reality that grounded everything else. And he hesitated for just a moment, not out of uncertainty, but out of balance, because whatever this place was offering, whatever it was revealing, it could not exist separate from the lives he had carried into it. And Rex seemed to sense that shift as well, stepping back a half pace, his gaze moving between Lucas and the doorway, as if reminding him that both paths remained open, that neither had to be chosen at the expense of the other. And Lucas nodded once, a small, almost imperceptible motion, before turning fully and walking back toward the threshold, his steps steady, his breath even. And as he re-entered the first room, the warmth greeted him again, familiar now, grounding, and the sight before him held him there for a moment. The mother dog now fully alert, her body no longer pressed low but lifted slightly, her head high, her eyes following him with that same quiet awareness. And the puppies were moving more freely now, their small forms shifting and pressing against her, their movements no longer uncertain but guided. And Lucas felt that quiet sense of completion settle in, not as an ending, but as a transition, because what had begun in the storm, what had driven him to stop, to listen, to act, had led to this, not just survival, but restoration. And he stepped closer, kneeling beside them once more, his hand resting lightly on the edge of the blanket, not touching, just present. And the mother dog did not pull away, did not flinch. She simply watched him, steady and calm. And in that gaze, Lucas felt something he had not expected, not gratitude in the way people often imagined it, but recognition, a shared understanding that something had been given and something had been received, and it did not need to be named to be real. And Rex settled beside them again, his body relaxed, his breathing slow, the quiet anchor that had held this entire moment together. And Lucas allowed himself to sit there, just for a while, the rhythm. From the other room, still faintly present, the warmth steady, the storm now nothing more than a distant memory above them. And he realized then that whatever this place had been built for, whatever purpose it still served, it had already fulfilled something essential. It had given life a place to return, a space to begin again. And as that understanding settled into him, Lucas Carter felt something within himself shift as well. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough to know that the path ahead would not be the same as the one he had walked before. Morning did not arrive all at once. It filtered down slowly through the narrow opening above, a pale gray light slipping into the underground space like a quiet promise rather than a declaration. And Lucas Carter noticed it not by sight at first, but by the subtle change in the air, the way the stillness shifted just enough to suggest that the storm had moved on, leaving behind something calmer, something gentler. And he sat there for a moment longer beside the dogs, his posture relaxed, his breathing steady, the quiet rhythm from the hidden chamber now blending so seamlessly into the background that it felt less like a separate presence and more like part of the space itself. And the mother dog stretched slightly, a small but meaningful movement, her strength returning not in a sudden surge, but in steady increments, the kind that lasts. And the puppies pressed closer to her, their small bodies warm and alive, their movements no longer uncertain, and Lucas allowed himself to watch them, to stay in that moment without needing to move forward, because for the first time in a long while, there was no urgency pulling at him, no immediate threat, no demand that he act before thinking. And Rex lay nearby, his head resting on his paws, eyes half closed but aware, the quiet guardian that had guided him here and stayed without question. And Lucas glanced toward the entrance above, the faint light growing stronger now, outlining the edges of the hatch, and he understood that eventually they would have to leave, that this place, as steady and intentional as it felt, was not meant to hold them forever, but that understanding did not carry the same weight it once would have, because leaving no longer meant returning to emptiness. It meant carrying something forward, something that had begun here, and he stood slowly, stretching just enough to remind his body of its strength. And he moved toward the shelves, gathering what they would need, not everything, not more than necessary, just what made sense, the kind of choices that came from experience rather than fear. And as he worked, his movements were quiet, deliberate, guided by a calm that felt new but not unfamiliar. And when he returned to the bench, the mother dog watched him, her eyes steady, her posture stronger. And when he knelt beside her, she did not hesitate. She shifted slightly, allowing him closer, accepting the space he offered. And Lucas reached out gently, resting his hand near her shoulder, not pressing, not forcing contact, just present, and she held his gaze for a moment, something unspoken passing between them, something that did not need explanation. And Rex rose then, stepping closer, his presence completing the quiet circle that had formed between them. And Lucas exhaled softly, the air leaving him with a sense of clarity he had not expected to find in a place like this. And he moved carefully, lifting the puppies one by one, placing them securely, ensuring they would stay warm, his hands steady, his focus clear. And when he turned back to the mother dog, she rose slowly, her legs steady enough now, her balance returning, and she followed his movements without hesitation, not because she had no choice, but because she had chosen to trust. And Lucas felt that settle into him, not as a burden, but as something steady, something he could carry without losing himself. And he glanced once more toward the hidden chamber, toward the space that had revealed more than he could fully understand. And the faint rhythm was still there, unchanged, steady, as if it would remain long after he left. And Lucas nodded slightly, a quiet acknowledgement, because not every discovery needed to be taken with him. Some things were meant to stay where they were, to wait for the next moment, the next person, the next path that crossed it. And he turned back toward the hatch, the light above now clear, the world outside no longer hidden by the storm. And as he began to move, Rex stepped ahead, guiding the way as he always had, and the mother dog followed, her steps careful but certain. And Lucas came behind them, carrying what remained, his movements steady, his pace unhurried. And when they reached the base of the stairs, he paused for just a moment, looking back into the space that had held them through the night, the warmth, the quiet, the life that had returned within it. And he did not linger, not because it did not matter, but because it mattered enough to carry forward. And he turned, stepping up into the morning light, the cold air meeting him again. But it no longer felt the same. It no longer carried the same weight, because he was not the same person who had stepped in a storm. And as his boots pressed into the snow, fresh and untouched, Lucas Carter realized something simple and certain, that sometimes the miracle is not what you find, but who you become by choosing to stay. And beside him, Rex moved forward, and behind him, the small, steady sounds of life followed, quiet but undeniable, and together they stepped into a world that felt just a little less empty than before.